May 1958. An oil company's aircraft is crossing the Libyan desert, roughly 440 miles inland, and the geologist aboard looks down and sees an American bomber sitting on the sand. It has been there for 15 years. When men finally reach it on the ground, the radio still works. The guns and the signal flares still fire. There is a thermos on the floor at the flight engineer's position with coffee in it, and one of the officers pours some and drinks it. What everybody tells you is also aboard is water. That one will not stand up. The official investigation report, quoted in the Air Force's own journal, says there were no water jugs on that aeroplane, as reported in some accounts. The officer who quoted it contradicted himself 2 pages earlier. 60 years of retelling have leaned on a detail the Air Force itself could not keep straight. The aircraft is broken across the middle and otherwise close to intact because nobody was flying it when it came down. It put itself down, and there is no one inside. He reported it to the American Air Base at Wheelus. Nothing happened. In June, another crew flew over her and fixed her position to within a mile and reported that to the Royal Air Force, and nothing happened then either. Wheelus had no record of an American aircraft lost out in that desert, so as far as the paperwork was concerned, there was nothing out there to find. It took a third sighting in November before anyone marked her on a map, and another 4 months before a ground party reached her. 9 men took that aeroplane into the desert. 8 of them were eventually found, and it took nearly 2 more years. Everything in this story gets found once, and then lost again. So the question is not how the aircraft got there. The Army answered that. The question is why 9 trained airmen climbed out of a working bomber and walked away from it into open sand. That answer was given on American television in 1960 by a man who had survived exactly the same trap himself 6 weeks before they flew into it. Subscribe to Nick's World War II archive for more files like this one. The 4th of April, 1943. The base is Soluch in Libya, 30 miles south of Benghazi. It is not really a base. It is sand strips. The wind never stops. The sand gets into engines, valves, instruments. The aircraft is a B-24D, serial number 41-24301. Somewhere in the 12 days before this mission, somebody painted a name on her, the Lady Be Good. Her number, painted on the nose, is 64. It is her first combat mission. It is also the first combat mission as pilot for Lieutenant William Hatton, and the second for his co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert Toner of North Attleboro, Massachusetts, who is 26 years old and who keeps a diary. They are going to the harbor at Naples. They fight a headwind the whole way out, and they arrive late, and 30 miles short of the target, over Sorrento, they give it up. Only 11 aircraft out of roughly 24 reach Naples at all. The Lady Be Good is not one of them. She drops her bombs into the Mediterranean and turns for home alone in the dark. Nobody tells them, because nobody knows. What was a headwind going out is a tailwind coming home, and it is pushing them over the ground far faster than their own arithmetic says. Most tellings of this story skip the wind altogether, and the one that does engage with it puts it on the wrong leg. The wind was helping them, and that is what killed them. At around midnight, she calls the direction-finding station at Benina and asks for a bearing. Benina answers, 330 degrees. Here is what almost every version of this story tells you next, that her automatic direction finder was broken. That claim is everywhere, and when you chase it to its source, it turns out to rest on a cable television episode from 2003. The officer CBS put in front of a camera says something else, and it is far worse. The instrument was working perfectly. A radio compass of that period drives a needle that points at whatever station it is tuned to. Point at Benina from out over the sea, and the needle sits toward the nose. Colonel Norman Appold, who in 1943 flew in the Lady Be Good's own squadron and later ran the group's operations, explained what happened instead. He said it on camera on CBS in 1960. The recording still exists and almost nobody has watched it. Because of the speed that tailwind was giving them, they were already past Benina and going away from it. So the needle did what it was built to do. It swung around and pointed behind the aircraft. And Hatton, looking at a correct reading, decided it was wrong. In Appold's account, he concluded he was picking up a high-powered German beacon in Sicily, somewhere off his tail. The ground station could not save him either. Benina's finder was the type that returned the same bearing whether the aeroplane was inbound over the water or outbound over the desert. 330, or its exact opposite, 150. As the Air Force put it in its own journal 30 years later, the Lady Be Good was not headed home. She was headed exactly 180 degrees away from home. The American Graves Registration Service wrote it up like this. The actions of the pilot in flying 440 miles into the desert, however, indicate the navigator probably took a reciprocal reading off the back of the radio directional loop antenna. Probably. Not certainly. No name, no blame. She crossed her own airfield in the dark, and nobody at Soluch saw her. One officer heard 4 engines pass overhead and go on south, and thought it too slight a thing to break radio silence over. She flew on for the best part of another 2 hours. Then the engines began to die, and Hatton ordered the crew out. The air-sea rescue that went up, according to that same journal, was reported to have been sent out on a bearing of 330, the same one. 6 weeks before all of this, on the 20th of February, Appold flew the same route to the same target and very nearly did not come back. In his own written account, his formation hit an unpredicted headwind of 100 miles an hour and arrived over Sicily an hour late. Coming home in total darkness, with the wind now behind him and no radio beacon signal at all, he missed the coastline entirely. He was 150 miles west of where he believed he was, out over the Gulf of Sidra, and he did not know it. His own sentence is the one that matters. He wrote that he was unable to tell whether there was water or land beneath him. He got down to under 15 minutes of fuel, saw a light, and put a 4-engine bomber onto unsurveyed desert after 11 hours in the air. He walked away from it. 17 years later, CBS sat him in a television studio to explain how 9 men had flown into the same darkness and not walked away. He named 5 factors, and 2 of them were his own. Winds nobody had measured, and the amazing similarity, as he put it, of the desert and the water. They came down about a dozen miles from where their aircraft would put itself down. They walked the other way, and every version of this story reaches for the same moment here. If they had only turned around, the argument goes, they would have lived. They were not being stupid. They were walking toward a sea they believed they had crossed the shore of not long before. That sea was 400 miles behind them. Toner writes it in his diary on the 5th of April. Start walking northwest. 3 days later, still going northwest. There is a second diary, kept by the flight engineer, Harold Ripslinger, and it is worth saying plainly that not one of the 9 biggest videos I could find on this story mentions that it exists. 8 men set out. The 9th, the bombardier John Voravka, never reached them. His parachute did not open properly. Between the 8 of them, they had half a canteen of water. Toner wrote down how they rationed it. 1 capful each per day. They lasted 8 days on that, in a place that reaches 130 degrees at midday, which is considerably longer than anyone afterwards thought possible. The first trace searchers ever found of the 8 was a pair of boots, 19 miles north of the wreck, pointing north. You will hear that number quoted as the distance at which the men died. It is not. It is where a pair of their boots was found. 5 of them stopped together somewhere between 78 and 85 miles out. The official figures disagree with each other, and both are official, so take the range. 2 of them went further than the rest, into a labyrinth of 600-foot dunes, and one of them got furthest of all, something like 115 miles from where he jumped. The recovery reports say that man was Ripslinger. The physical evidence says otherwise. Shelley was found with Ripslinger's wallet and papers in his own pocket, which means Shelley was alive when Ripslinger was not, and had stopped to pick up his friend's things to carry home. You will see 200 miles quoted for that walk. That figure comes from the same television program that gave everyone the broken direction finder, and nobody has ever found Vernon Moore. The recovery took her apart, and her instruments went into other aircraft that were still flying. That is where the second story starts. 3 of them are always listed. A transport that lost an engine on a Thanksgiving run carrying mail and turkeys and had to dump its cargo to get down. A second transport that went into the sea, and an army otter that crashed into the Gulf of Sidra. Go and look for those 3, and they come apart in your hands in 3 different ways. The Thanksgiving one has no date, no tail number, and no accident report anywhere I could reach, which is unsurprising because the aircraft landed safely, and nothing that lands safely generates a file. The second one is real, and it is worse than the legend tells you. A C-47 did ditch in the Mediterranean off Libya in June of 1959. The Associated Press carried it at the time. The pilot, Captain Guy Olphin of Arlington, Kansas, was killed when the impact tore off a propeller and threw it into the cockpit. That much is documented. What is not documented is the only part the legend cares about, which is whether the radio in that aeroplane came out of the Lady Be Good.
And the third one is the one that finishes the story off.
The Otter crash is real. The 4th of January 1960, 10 men aboard, none of them found. But the armrest was not fitted to that aircraft as a spare. Their maintenance officer had taken one armrest off the wreck to use as a pattern and had built copies from it for the whole squadron. The thing that washed up on the beach was a woodworking template. And it is worth saying that the Otter itself was never found. Nothing was ever recovered from that crash that could establish whose armrest came ashore. The journal that started all this says only that an armrest washed up. Everyone downstream added the words of the Lady Be Good. That is the mechanism the museum names, and it is wrong, and the man who found the armrest on the sand is the one who explains it. Now the part that matters. Not one source I could reach asserts that any part caused anything. You can even watch the legend assemble itself. 2 of the incidents appear in a book in 1962. The word jinx arrives in another book in 1966. All 3 are collected together for the first time in a wire story in 1969, sourced to gossip on the base. By 1973, it is in an Air Force journal with the hedge still attached, and by the time the museum prints it, the hedge is gone. And there is one more thing, which is that her parts were actually examined. Hydraulic components went to Vickers and to Sperry Rand. An oil sample went to Shell. Ammunition went to Olin, which reported that from a ballistic standpoint, it appeared safe. An engine went to McDonnell Douglas. Every one of those analyses found the material in good order. The only engineering work ever done on anything taken off the Lady Be Good found nothing wrong with any of it. Nobody added evidence at any point. They only added confidence. By the early 1970s, she was a shell. Souvenir hunters had gone at her with axes. In 1968, an RAF team took 21 items away for analysis, including an engine. and that engine turned out to have a flak hole in it, which does not sit comfortably in any account of her last flight. In August of 1994, what was left of her was lifted out of the desert altogether and taken to a military barracks at Tobruk for safekeeping. You will read that the Libyan army did this. It was not the army. It was done under the direction of the controller of antiquities at Cyrene, which is a different thing entirely, and it tells you what she had become by then. After that, the record thins to rumor. She is reported to have been moved to an airbase. People will tell you she sat in a compound in Tobruk until about 2012. None of it meets the standard of anything else in this video, so I will tell you what is actually true, which is that we could not establish where she is now. In 1973, a civilian analyst at Wright-Patterson, writing in the Air Force's own professional journal, looked at the stories already growing around this aeroplane and predicted what would happen to them. As the years pass, he wrote, the haunted aspects of the Lady Be Good will grow more fixed with each repetition of her anguished saga. He was right. The curse got repeated. The broken instrument got repeated. The water that was never aboard got repeated. Everything here was found once and then lost again. The aeroplane, the men, all but one of them, and the answer, which was always harder and quieter than a curse. On a black night over the wrong desert, a working instrument told 9 men which way home was, and they had every reason in the world not to believe it. We kept the curse instead.